started here. Um, and one of the first things we're going to talk about here is some general enhancements. The first one here is going to save a file as a 3D PDF. So now you have the ability to take your files, whatever Mastercam files you have, and save it out as a 3D PDF file. Now, it is very easy to do. As soon as you go to File, Save As, you're going to have a 3D PDF file option in the Save As. Pick that, and it will save as a PDF file. Now, what this is going to look like here is it's going to look like this here. I'll slide this over. And what it's going to be is a 3D PDF file that anybody can open. So they don't need Mastercam. You can rotate these views around, you can zoom in on them, zoom out on them. You can click on different faces and it'll take you to the faces. You could turn faces on or off here on the left. And I just had to open this with Adobe. So if you have Adobe, you should be able to open these and scroll around. And anything on your screen is going to be put in the PDF. So I have my fixture on here, little subplate. So anything you have on the screen, when you hit Save As, you're going to get in your 3D PDF file. So that's kind of a cool little switch they did there, allowing people to open up, files and look at stuff without having a Mastercam file. So go ahead and take a look at that and try it out. See if it can be useful for you guys. Next one here, auto-hide large prompts. So the large prompts that we get when we're doing selection typically, now we can right-click on there and we have an auto-hide option. It's kind of nice. Just shrinks up and then you can just hover over it to expand it back out so you can see your screen. And then bounding box. There's a lot of changes in bounding box as far as new options. And they gave you a new wrap option and a silhouette boundary, minimum volume. So we'll take a look at them on parts down the road here, but there's significant changes in bounding box. New note functions have been added, so this is for drafting only. They redesigned the interface for drafting entities, and now we can have legacy notes. We can have some presets in there. So if you do a lot of drafting, here's some changes for you guys to be able to streamline that a little bit. If you have notes that you're always writing instead of rewriting them, now we can have legacy notes, and we can also have presets on some settings for the drafting functions. Stock model. There's now a default name for stock model. As you know, before you could get out of a stock model, you had to enter a name, so now you don't have to do that anymore. And it'll default to name, number 1, 2, 3, 4, if you don't put names in there. So, a minor change, but kind of a nice one that should have been in there quite a few years ago. And then the only other change you'll really see in stock model is the 5-axis only checkbox has been renamed to mill flutes only. So if you're looking for the 5-axis only checkbox, it is now the mill flutes. So no change there, just a change in the way it's worded. So not a big one, but just to be aware of that if you're using them functions. Contextual tabs. So contextual tabs, this is a little bit bigger change. So if you have a wireframe on your screen and you click the wire, it will change your ribbon to a lot of the functionality that wireframe typically uses. That is what the contextual tab is. Now, we do have them for wireframe, surfaces, solids, mesh, and geometry selections. If you do not want these on, you just want your ribbon to stay where it's at, you can go into your options and turn them off. As you can see in the screenshot there, they're just a checkbox there. If you want 1 or 2 on, you can just leave them on and turn the rest off. It's really highly dependent on you if you want the contextual tabs or not. Once you start clicking through 2021, you'll see them. Depending on what you're selecting on the screen, you'll see your ribbons changing. So they can be turned off on the right there in your options menus. Some design enhancements. We have whole axis will now allow multiple solid bodies. Before you could only do one solid body at a time. Now if you click that on, you can do multiple bodies at a time, multiple solids at a time. You don't have to do them in separate operations. And then mirroring, now we can mirror about the X and Y axis. So it'll put, 4 on there to mirror them in both directions for you. So you don't have to go back and do them in another operation. Nice little change there. Just gives you another option so you don't have to go back. Entity associativity. I threw this one in there, and a good example of this would be that puck, yellow puck I have on the screen. So if you drew a circle and you extruded that out into a solid, and then you tried to go and delete the wireframe associated to that solid, you're going to get the message on the right, deleting a reference entity. It doesn't like that when you do that, especially with solids. And now you have the hide associativity entities option that you can hit. And what that'll do is that will tell you what is associative to what you're trying to delete, so you can decipher if you really want to do that or not. Just a small little change, but it can help people, maybe not delete entities that they shouldn't be. So check it out, try it out, and it'll just give you a little bit of a prompt there to help you out. Default simulator machines. So this is a change in 2021. So what we can do now is we can default a machine simulation machine. So if you had to go back and re-switch the machine every time, you no longer have to do that. You can set a default machine, kind of like setting a default mill or a default lathe. It'll be in your configurations, so your system configurations, under simulation and simulator, and kind of in the middle there's a default machine to pick. So if you're always using a horizontal machine, or that's all you have, and you want to simulate to that machine, you can pick it. You don't have to go back and keep on changing that. So that's just another change in 2021. And then you'd be able to just go ahead and hit the simulate button, and it'll pull the default machine in. So not a major change, but a nice little change there. Another general enhancement, we added an operation here, check tool reach. I think this one can be very, very useful for a programmer. So what check tool reach will do is you pick your solid model, and it'll tell you what your currently defined tool will be able to machine. So you can manually define a tool, or you can pick a tool out of a library. You can also put a holder on there, and then we can run a test on there by the preview button down below, and that'll tell you what can be reached by that tool and what cannot be reached by that tool, and you can change the colors on these. So where this is useful is if you get a part in and you think, well, I'm going to take a 3/8 end mill and I'm going to rough that whole thing out. Maybe you could run a check tool reach quick on it and see if that tool will actually be able to get all the spots that you want to machine before you get there, program it, and then find it in backplot or verify. So it's just a quick little one to try out and utilize to try to save some time on tool selection. Chaining enhancements. So now we have display all selected arrows as an option. It's 3 squiggly arrows, and that'll show you all your chains. So we've never had this option before. You always had to look at the last chain you selected and not be able to view them all at once. Now you can view them as you're chaining if you want. And chaining modes persist. So what that means is what you used last in here will be selected. You used to have a default setting for this of what you wanted on every time you came in the chaining manager. You no longer have that. That's gone. Now it's going to default to the last used mode in your chaining managers. Solid chaining enhancements. When selecting chains in translucent mode, MasterCam displays a loop associated with the face, even if the face is on the back side of the part. So if you can see through the part, you can pick a loop on the back side of it. And as you'll see that loop appear as you're hovering over the edges. And then C-plane, that's really going to vary the functionality depending on the chaining method you're using. What I mean by that is we can go to single edge, and if we're on C-plane and we pick an edge, it'll loop all the way around. If we want just a single edge, we need to go to 3D. And if it's on 3D, then it just picks a single edge. And I can show you this on our chaining part that I'll show you here in a little bit. Dynamic start point. Dynamic start point, now you have the ability to do that for solid chaining. So before we couldn't move the chaining around, or the start point and the end point of the chain. Now we can in solids, so we can move it around on an edge. Lathe chaining, we also have solids lathe chaining. We'll see in the lathe section that I do. Outer open and outer shared edges is a change in solid chaining that we will see today. Loop selection changed a little bit as far as how the C-plane works. And then pick a reference face. The reference face dialog that used to pop up with the green check in there saying pick a face, that is no longer, it is gone. So as we move our mouse over the loops or faces, we see the loops that it would pick. So that's a very nice change for us. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at some solid chaining examples. And I have a part up here, kind of an automotive part, and we're going to deal with this pink face here. So I already set a plane on this pink face, and the new solid chaining features are going to come into play here. So I'm just going to go do a contour tool path. And our chaining dialog here has remained essentially the same as what you're used to. We still have edges, loops, faces, partial loops. And now here's where it kind of changed. It's now called outer open edges and outer shared edges. These are the changes in here. We also still have cavities and bosses working the same way they did. So these two here are the two we're going to focus on. So maybe I wanted to chain the outer open edges of that pink face. So if I just click on that option and go and pick this face, do you see how it picked all the open edges only? So this edge wasn't picked and this edge wasn't picked. So the way you got to kind of envision this is if you take a 1, 2, 3 block, and if you're able to slide that 1, 2, 3 block off the face, that is going to be an outer open edge. As you can see, the radiuses on this one that it's touching, you couldn't slide it past. So that's not an outer open edge. The other option here is outer shared edges. And once again, I'm going to pick that option. I'm going to go pick this face, this pink face again. And now it only chains what is a shared edge. So it takes that face and what's an outer edge, but shared, so you can't slide. It's interrupted by something. In this case, they're interrupted by a couple of radiuses. These are the two new chaining options in here for this to make selection a lot easier. Nice changes, as we can see. Another one here, if I go to loop, turn off that face, see how I can hover over this face and see how it gives me that loop, or that face and it gives me that loop, or this face here, that one there. Which one do I want? I just have to move my mouse very slowly and I get the different options here. That's that reference face. The reference face is no longer, it's gone. So that's what you get. You just move your mouse until you get your reference loop on that face that you want. These options are really nice. I really like them. You know, if I want to come back and pick an outer edge maybe on a feature like this, I can just simply go ahead and grab that face and it grabs that outer loop. Or if I get rid of that one and come back in here and do the interior. Now I have everything that's touching that face. Get over there. And it'll roll off this side, so it's not picking that chain, but this is all interrupted. Same with the bottom. It'll roll off this face, but this is interrupted there. So it starts the chain there and ends the chain there. So solids chaining didn't change a lot, but it did change with a few of these options here. Mainly these two, and with reference loop. If I am in a loop option, it'll give me the loop according to where my mouse is. There's a loop, there's a loop. Which one do I want? Without having that green checked face on there. So try them out. I really like the new chaining features, or selection options, I should say. So check them out and see what you think. We also have some chaining examples here I want to talk about. Chaining has changed here a little bit for us. I'm going to go to a different part here. And now on this part here, you know, pretty basic part here, and I'm just going to do some contours around the edges here, these blue edges. So I'm going to come into my contour again, and I'm going to pick some edges. So I'm going to start with edges. Now, the edge option with C-plane in 3D and how C-plane is acting with chaining will be shown here. So if I leave this to 3D, right, or I'm sorry, C-plane right now, and if I go chain that, do you see how it loops all the way around? I can't get a single edge there. If I try that, because I'm on C-plane. If I get rid of that and I move this to 3D and try to chain the same exact edge, now I get my single edge. So it's very important that people understand how that works. C-plane will still loop all the way around an edge. 3D will stop at the intersections of them edges. So if you need to do a chain like that, make sure you have 3D on, otherwise it's going to loop around. I'm going to go ahead and chain the other side of this. So I got my two blue sections done. And we'll also do this pocket features also. So I'm going to change my option here to my outer shared edges. I'm going to go pick that face. Chains it correct, and I will go do my other side also. And it chains around. So I have all my chains here done on my screen. And I'm only seeing my last chain, and this is typical of what we were seeing in previous versions. Now I have the display all selection arrows option here. So if I left click on there, it will pop arrows on every chain that I did there. Now the nice thing about this is maybe I chained it, but I forgot that I had clamps on the part. So right here I have clamps. So I'm going to cut through this clamp and I'm going to cut through this clamp. So I need to do some adjustments here. And specifically I need to adjust both edges that I picked and crank them back a little bit. So by showing all chains I can see where they are. Now what I can do is I can hover over the arrow that I want to chain. In this case this is going to be this end point here. And once I click on there, now it opens up our dynamic function, our dynamic start and end points. So I can left click on there, click on that arrow, and now I can move this arrow wherever I want. So if I left click there, do you see how it dropped it in that new location? Once again, I'll go and show all arrows, so now that's updated. So now if I come to my other side here, maybe a top view, I can see that I'm going to run through this clamp. So I'm going to click on that arrow, go to dynamic function again, scroll it back. It looks like it didn't want to take there. And now I can slide that back. Left click, show all my arrows. And now if I'm in my top view, now I can see I'm going to start here and end here. Start here and end here so I don't collide through them clamps. My other cuts look to be fine, so I don't need to move them. But you'd have the ability to view all your chains, turn on some fixturing, and make sure that you're not going to collide with any of the fixturing or any of the clamps, anything else that would be in the way that you didn't see when you started chaining. You cannot go back into this, so this is just for live chaining, kind of the initial hit when you get the solid chaining manager. So this is kind of a one shot here where you can view all chains. Once you accept out of here, then you need to go back into your chain manager to see the chains. So a little bit limited there, but highly useful here as far as this chaining option added did. And that'll be in wireframe chaining also. And go ahead and show your chains, select the one you want to change, dynamic, and go ahead and move that. So once again, I would check that out. No longer do we have to go back and rechain singles, rechain alls if we catch it in the beginning of the chaining dialog box. Another big change is solid enhancements. So solids, we could always remove the history, right? If we wanted to do some modeling on that solid, we would remove the history. Well, now what we have is we have, we can detect and create custom holes pretty much. We can detect holes with add history. saving and editing standard, and custom hole operations, and no history modeling. So we went quite a bit on this, and this is very useful not only for holes, but as I'll show you when I get into the part, is we can make a solid and we can get pretty much a OptiRough environment without any of the holes in the solid. We can go back into a hole and we can change how the hole is if it's a special port tool or a custom hole. So once we get into the file, I think you'll understand a little bit more of where we're going here. I'm going to go ahead and open up this manifold. So here's that manifold. It's a bunch of holes. There's holes everywhere in this thing. So what we want to do here is, first I'm going to take a look at the solids menu. And right now I have a body and I have a body. So pretty much these are, all this is really a dumb solid. There's nothing else there, right? All it is a solid like we brought in from SolidWorks or Inventor or AutoCAD or whatever you would have brought in. No history to this model. So what I can do is I can come up to my model prep option and I can go to add history. Now if I go to add history, I can pick my solid that I want, end selection, and it'll pop me into this dialog box here. Now it says features. What do you want to find for features? Do you want fillets? Do you want extruded holes? Do you want to find hole operations? Well, in this case, I want to find hole operations. And I'm going to say, what's the minimum and maximum size? Well, I'm in a metric, so I'm just going to put a big number in here. I'll put 50 millimeters in there. And I'm going to go ahead and green check. You're going to see my solids menu here just kind of take off on me. And what it does is it adds history back. So it says there's 65 holes were detected in one body. So it went and put all the history of them holes back in here. So I can see I got all these simple holes. I have counter bores. Now I'd be able to click on these. So this one is right here. And it kind of highlights it yellow for me. I can go to that one. So what I could do is if I wanted to alter one of these, maybe this hole here, this port hole here, I can double click on it. And what it'll do is it'll get me into the dialog box. Since it put the history back in, that made the hole. So now it's saying the top, here's the second section, third and fourth section. Depths it puts in here for me, so I could alter them. I could also change the bottom. I could put different taper angles in. So there's a lot that I can change here. I could change the type of hole it is here by a simple hole, a counter bore, countersink. I pretty much go back and I can remodel them holes, and it gives me all the data. So, you know, you did have model prep, push, pull, but you'd have to do each individual section at once. Now you're able to go in there and see the whole as one, so you can go and make mass edits in there. So I could go and mass edit these if I want, one by one. And it's going to rebuild it here. Another thing I can do is I have a stop op in here. If I hold down left click, I can drag this thing all the way to the top and drop it. And you kind of got to drop it in between, otherwise it doesn't take. It's kind of goofy there. So now what happened was I put a stop up way up to the top, and now look at my part. Now I missed one hole there. So I'm going to drop this right above there. There we go. And now that hole will be disappearing out of there. And now what I have here is now I have a perfect environment for maybe an OptiRough. No holes in the part. This is what I have to rough out before I put any holes in the part. So I could utilize this now for a OptiRough cut or a roughing op. This also, it kind of sounds funny, but you could also use this for packaging. So I could come in here and I would know that this is what my packaging needs to look like if I needed to pack this away. So that could be another use for this. And it's just because I drug this stop op up. Now if I drag this down, let's say below here, and I'm just going to drop it. Now what you'll see is it has to tessellate. And now it added what was open there. So everything that's not stopped, now it just opens them holes up for me. Now I could go and alter them again if I wanted to. You know, you can drop and drag these wherever you want. Maybe I go up a little bit, it's going to cover in some more of these. See how they disappeared there? So the add history is kind of a cool option. I like it for stuff like this. If I want to opti-rough something and I don't want to do the holes, or I want to do a multi-axis roughing pass and I don't need the holes in there, well, now I can get that out of that model without going back to the developer and seeing if they have a model without the holes in it. So again, check it out, try it out, and see if it works for you. Bounding box. Bounding box changes are huge. So one change we will see here is auto orientation. So the one on the picture on the left here, this one right here, that was a bounding box, and we set the orientation to auto. Well, you'll see that my bounding box actually tilted a little bit to be most, you know, probably the best case scenario to get the part in the stock. The one on the right is construction plane. That's the way we're used to seeing it. It's just going to bound it pretty much according to the C-plane, so an X and Y location. So the auto and the construction plane, them are a couple changes. Not really construction plane, but auto is. So auto will try to find best fit for you. We also added wrap and minimum volume. So the picture on the left here pretty much took this part, and by wrapping it by minimum volume, it pretty much puts saran wrap around that part. Now what this is mainly used for is, you know, a collision boundary. You know, many reasons, maybe packaging again. Maybe, you know, in a 5-axis machine, if we want to drive our tool around that part to drill some holes and do minimum retracts, maybe we can follow the saran wrap on this part, or the wrap in this case. Over to the right, we also have wrap, but we have silhouette boundary. So you'll see the picture changes a little bit. See how it doesn't wrap around the part, it just kind of gives me the silhouette boundary and cuts the silhouette boundary out of the bounding box. So that one can be handy also if you just want the true shape around that part. You don't want a rectangle. You want it, what's going to be the size of that part if I created a silhouette boundary, and it'll build the bounding box for you that way. So once again, quite handy. And, you know, safety zone for wrap. You know, once we get into our multi-axis cuts, then we have a safety zone, and we will have the wrap option in there. So we can pick the model and say wrap it, and then it will use that as a safety zone for retracts around that part. Once again, quite handy. And there's some more bounding box stuff we will look at in the milling section here, and multi-axis. And one more here, I want to take this bone plate, and I want to show you on a bone plate what we can do with the bone plate with bounding box. So if I go to my top view on this part, this bone screw is kind of out into space. And maybe I want to know a minimum volume size on a round of what I need to cut this part out. What I can do is I can come into my bounding box, and I'm going to pick my whole part and end selection. So right off the bat here, it defaults to rectangular. If I go to cylindrical, it puts a cylinder around there. Now, there it is, you know, and my part's all the way in there. Now, this isn't very helpful for me. In this orientation here, it's kind of worthless. I'm not going to take a piece of stock that big and try to cut that part out. Now, I could look at the other axis, maybe a Y-axis, and that's pretty much just as bad as what we currently had on there. So what we have here is we do have an option to go auto orientation. So if I go to auto orientation in the Y-axis, now you'll see that it gives me a round. So it's giving me a round slug with my part all the way in it. Now this is useful. Now that's giving me my diameter. So this is a metric file, so it's saying my radius needs to be 10.652 to cut that part out. So I need bar stock, probably 11 millimeters to fully cut that out. So there's another instance of maybe not wrapping it, but using the auto orientation to get what you really do want. So if I make this into a solid, this is kind of where this can be useful now. So I made it into a solid model. Now up into model prep, we have align to Z. So I can go to align to Z and I can pick this face. And it aligns it to the Z. Now another thing I can do is I can grab my additional geometry here. So if I say transform to plane, I'm going to pick the top plane here, be normal, and pick additional geometry. And I have my part in there. So I'm going to go to my color mask and pick purple. Now if I green check out of here, now I'm orientated to top view, normal, on center line. So you can utilize that function for lathes, for milling. You know, maybe I'm putting this in a 4th axis rotary in a mill. Now it's orientated automatically correctly for me without really doing much for work. So that'd be another case for the bounding backs auto and allowing it to align to Z in the model prep function. So try them out. Once again, more options here, just showing you a few things here. Some more changes here in design enhancements, new flow line functions. We have edit UV and reflow UV. So edit UV allows you to switch U and V directions as well as to independently reverse the U and V directions of flow on any number of surfaces. If you are using full line toolpath, the one limitation is the flows of the surfaces. If they're not all the same, you're going to get, you know, long cuts and cross cuts and stuff like that. So now we have the ability to switch the U and V directions of them. Reflow UV allows you to redefine the flows by specifying a rotation angle or a new boundary curve. So as you see by the picture right above that, it shows 4 surfaces that came in that way, and we are able to reflow the surfaces by picking boundary chains or rotations on the bottom. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And I have 3 parts on my screen here. The first one to look at is this purple part here. And to find these options, it's going to be up in the surfaces option, and the first one to look at is edit UV. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my whole surfaces here on this purple part, and you'll notice that my U and V directions are not matching. What I mean is this green one here does not match this one here, so the U and V's are opposite. In our options here, we have switch UVs, which will just flip that around, not really help us in this case, flip in the U and V direction. What I can do is I can reverse the U, just flips it left to right or right to left on the screen right now. We can flip the V's to point up or point down. So these aren't really doing much for us, right? Now, may give you enough to say that what you need for your parts, but in this case here, this isn't enough. Now, if I come to this propagate option, and if I click on propagate, what this is going to do is going to take the targeted U and V directions and match them to a seed surface or a reference surface. So if I left click on there and go and pick this surface right here, now you'll see that my V's are all going the same direction and my U's are all going the same direction. Now I'll get consistent cuts along here. So I'll get cuts along and I'll get cuts across. And they're all going to be the same. So I'll have that much more success with my surfacing. So that's, you know, edit the U and V's as an option. Next one to look at over here is reflowing. So I have 2 tool paths in here, full line tool paths. So if I run these, you'll notice that I just pretty much created surfaces and went with the flow. So the flow is kind of at an angle there, and that's the way I'd have to machine this previous to 2021. I wouldn't be able to change the flow directions that the part was going to drive along. So let's go ahead and we're going to reflow the circle first. So I'm going to go up to my reflow UV option. I'm going to pick my surface, and then I'm going to pick my chain that I want to follow along. So I pick my surface, and now I say reflow the UV about my arc that I picked. So if I green check out of there and hit enter, now you can see how I'm flow. So now I would have the ability to rotate this a little bit if I wanted to, or I can accept what I have here. So see how I'm going to cut a circular pattern now on this one. So I'm going to blue check on this one. I'm going to go and pick this surface here on this second one, and I'm going to pick two chains. So I'm going to pick that one first, and then I'm going to pick this one second. So I have two chains on there. What this is going to do is going to morph this one to this one. So it's going to kind of echo out until it gets back to the flat. So if I green check on there, now look at my flow line. It's not going at that angle. Now it's flowing along them surfaces. Only other change in here we would have is rotational angle, which gives us the dial. Now I don't want to do that because I'll screw up my flows, but if you just had to rotate the flow to an angle or snap to a point on another surface to try to align them manually, you would have that option with rotational angle here. So now if I green check out of here, both my tool paths went dirty. I'm going to regenerate these. And now when I go and run this, now you'll see that my cut is completely different. Now it's going in a round circular pattern on that one. And now it's really nice here. It's flowing. It's following the flow line boundary curves that I picked on the right one. So that's going to be a lot better cut for me, a lot more efficient, and a lot nicer looking probably. And it just straightens out at the end. So that can be a nice handy little thing they did there. We used to never be able to redo anything with the flow lines, and now we can. So definitely, if you're a flow line guy, you'll love that. That's definitely where it's at. So make sure you take a look at that and see what you think. Prototech training, we are open. We are training in our training center in Chaska. So make sure you check out our website for upcoming training classes, and prototech-engineering.com is our website. So make sure you're checking that. 2021 installation documents, we have everything. So we make them in-house, PDF files with all the links. So make sure you or your IT personnel are getting a hold of us for anything 2021 related, and we can get you the forms that you need. You can call us, or you can email us in at support@prototech-engineering.com for all the documents. So make sure you're doing that and getting up to date. And definitely a thank you. Appreciate you attending this webinar, and this is one of 5. So if you are using the other products coming up, make sure you're taking in them webinars also so you can learn what's new in 2021.